Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of It's No Secret with Dr. T. With me today is Shane Ross. Now, he owns a business called Raw Worldwide, and they do African safaris, which I think is pretty cool. And up until meeting Shane, I was sort of like, well, I don't think I'd ever want to go to Africa and be chased by lions. I mean, I've seen them in a zoo. How much different could it be? But after talking to Shane, not only does the business model they have sound really cool, it actually sounds like it'd be a great trip to go on. So, Shane, how you doing?
I'm good, mate. Really good.
Okay, so how long ago did you start this business?
Okay, so about 3 years ago I started this business, but 5 years ago I went over on a one-way ticket to Africa. I'd been working as an environmental advisor and lead across Australia for many years and just got jacked of working for other people and you know, the whole working for the man sort of thing. So decided to take life in my own hands and so flew over to Africa, looked at doing a guiding course straight up, and then basically after a 3-month pretty intensive guiding course came out of that going, yep, I'm confirmed I'd love to be a guide.
So do you say you went over there on behalf of, like, working for the Australian government first and seen parts of Africa, and then you went, I want to learn more about how to become a guide?
Nah, I just quit cold turkey.
I just quit cold. So, I thought you'd gone over there before and gone, this looks really interesting. So you just went straight over there and did it.
Straight over, yeah. So
that's ballsy.
Yeah, it was a bit. I was working for a company called Downer Engineering at the time, and we were working all over Australia, and I was working in some pretty high profile roles as an enviro. But I'd been reading Wilbur Smith novels for years. I grew up in Cape York, so I always really loved culture and being in the bush. And this is my way of getting over there and just, actually seeing it for myself. So I just quit outright. Everyone I worked with just shook their heads and went, why are you leaving this job? There's so much money here. You're crazy to leave. And I just went, no, it's not what I want to do. So that's it.
So when you arrived in Africa the first time, what was the first thing that went through your head? Was it like excitement? Like, oh, wow, I'm in Africa. This is so much better than I thought. Or did you arrive and go, oh, this is a little bit intimidating?
Yeah, I'd say it was probably a bit more intimidating at first. It wasn't, and if you read things like Wilbur Smith novels, you think that there's going to be elephants walking through the streets or there are no streets, and you just arrive on a plane and you're instantly
jungle
in the bush.
And there's bush there and
it's nothing like that. So it was a bit of a wake-up call, and it's part of the reason that I ended up building a guiding business in the end.
So you're saying it's not like that when you arrive, it's like arriving in a city? Like, I remember the first time I flew into Hawaii, and we thought, we're going to fly into Hawaii, and there's going to be like palm trees on either side of us, and as we walk off the plane onto the tarmac, there'd be hula girls there with grass skirts putting leis around our neck. And we arrived, and I went, it was concrete after concrete. It was nothing like I expected. It wasn't until you got out that you actually saw parts of Hawaii. So is that the same sort of thing?
Okay, so it's exactly like that. You fly into Johannesburg and you fly in through this. It's a bit of a cloud of, like, it's basically smog everywhere, and it's from the gold mining days that was the reason that Johannesburg and South Africa become so prominent. Back early on. So, but yeah, at the same time, you can leave Johannesburg and basically you can hire a car as a guide or as a tourist. You can hire a car, and within 3 hours you can drive into Kruger National Park and be driving around elephants, and literally they're right there in front of you. But a lot of the time, what would happen in that case, then you just don't know. You could quite easily come across an elephant and not know anything about them, and then you're instantly in trouble. So you've really got to learn what you do before you go bush properly.
So it's not the sort of thing you just walk up to an elephant and start patting it.
You could try, but it's not going to end well.
Because I said that to you, like I mentioned at the beginning, that the thought of going to Africa, because I've been to a zoo, I've seen elephants at the zoo, and I've seen lions at the zoo. That you sort of go, okay, is it that much different doing I'm assuming it is, to be out there amongst it? It must be completely different. Yeah,
it's entirely different, and even now the reason that I've built this business the way that I have is that basically if you go to a lodge, if you do the typical safari experience and you go to a lodge, what you'll end up getting is you get the beautiful, like the gold lined the dining sets. You get the beautiful porcelain bowls in your bathroom and all that sort of thing, but you don't. It's still a bit of a barrier to the wildlife, so you don't get a chance to see a lot of the actual animals. So
have you seen that movie Blended? You haven't seen it?
No, I haven't.
Adam Sandler movie Blended with Drew Barrymore?
No.
Okay, I won't sing it. I won't sing the song that I was singing. But it's sort of like they've won a trip to Africa in this 5 or 6 star resort. So they're like in this resort, which is, and the resort itself is supposed to actually really exist. But then they go off and do safaris, just the resort's their home base, and they go out for the day and then come back again. So what you do is a bit different to that.
Yeah, it's entirely different. This is much more of a likening to, probably out of Africa is a bit more closer to it. So
okay.
Instead of being in a lodge where you've got this barrier, you're essentially even assigned a guard. So someone will look after you whenever you're in the lodge. They make sure that you're perfectly safe, but it's almost like babysitting. So it's such a barrier, you don't get to appreciate.
That's how they do it?
That's how they do it. That's how most lodges do it, is they'll assign you, for example, a Maasai guard, and he'll look after you, but you can't. It's like he's a permanent shadow. You can't even go to the bathroom without him, sort of thing. It's a bit.
And why do they put? What's the point of doing that?
Basically, they're really, really worried about, I guess, liabilities and those sorts of things. But it's gone too far now, I think, where you actually don't get the authentic experience in a lodge as much as you could.
But are they sort of convincing people that you need this person?
Absolutely.
So people go out there for a trip and then they stay at this lodge, and then they're also paying for this person because you need to have that person. Whereas you're saying that's not necessarily the case. Yeah,
it's not. Look, it's necessarily in a way, in the sense of you should have someone that knows better around you so that you can learn from them and stay safe.
Yeah.
But the way that they've built it is that a lot of people come home from their trip and they've had this Maasai fellow shadowing them the whole time, and one of their highlights is that this person that's looked after them. And I personally think what they've done is they've put this person in there and he's totally protected you, but he's overprotected you, and you don't get to see. If you've got an elephant walking past a lodge, no one's going to go and grab you and say, "Oh, look, there's an elephant walking past." You just miss it.
Oh, right, okay.
You're just busy eating dinner or having your really flash eggs for breakfast, and you just don't get a chance to see those sorts of things.
So is it sort of like at one end you've got the lodge with the keeper and the babysitter, and then right at the other end you've got a silly couple, like my wife and I would turn up with a tent, a 2-man tent, and go, "We're going to drive through Africa," and we just pitch a tent up anywhere, thinking that should be right. So that's the extreme silly thing to do, and the other extreme is being babysitted. You're in between.
Absolutely, I am, but I've done the silly thing as well. So
you've done the silly thing yourself.
Yeah. So part of the lead in to starting this whole expedition is that I spent 3 years driving around Africa trying to I basically visited as many parks as I could in 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And I think that ended up being over 250 parks over just over 2 years of full-time driving. Over 100,000 Ks between South Africa and Kenya. And so across those 11 countries at that time, it's a chance of going into every park and going, okay, this is how they run it. They do this differently. They do that differently. Seeing the various animals. So each park has its own diversity as well.
Okay.
But the best part of that is just that you get to have a feel for how every other park is run, how every sort of, some are really quiet, some are really busy. And in each of those parks then, quiet ones, for example.
When you say busy, do you mean busy as in there's a lot of people there?
Yeah.
And therefore you don't see as many animals, and other ones there's less people, more animals?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Or even if the number of animals was consistent, but the number of tourists was more or less. And the ones where there's less tourists, the animals are quite spooked, like they're easily spooked. They're really on their toes. Whereas in a busy park like Kruger, the animals are really, really relaxed, and to the point of, if you encounter an elephant in Kruger, a lot of the times they push their limits and they come very close to you. And if you've never been around one before, you'll start your car and go to drive off. And it's the wrong thing to do, and you'll just totally upset them.
Oh, right, okay.
You've got to be very careful.
So what happens if you upset them? Well, you don't want to upset an elephant.
You don't want to upset an elephant. It's the biggest land animal in the world. Yeah, they're just so large. If you park alongside them or they walk alongside you, they literally block out the sun. They're really tall. They're up to 4 meters tall.
Yeah.
They're 6 tons. They're just absolute monsters. And they've got this trunk that has a lot of power, and they can be quite curious as well. And a good guide will get you really close, so you can get to see them. You get to look into their eyes and see how deeply they think and how beautiful an animal they are. But at the same time, if you've never been around one before and you suddenly drive up to an elephant, and especially if you start the car, that can be the one thing that just triggers them. If they're peacefully eating and then suddenly you start the car and they're right there, that's just going to upset them. And then next minute you just don't know what to do.
Yeah, you have an angry elephant on your hands.
Exactly. So part of the idea of then driving around for so long was that I test all of those things out and learn the hard way and just get a feel.
Okay, so you spent 3 years going to all these different parks, and then from that you chose which parks you thought were the best ones, and then you've based your safaris around those.
Yeah, good question. So basically I chose the parks that that became my favourites. So in the first 2 years I was guided by I was given some really good hints by a couple of different guides and filmographers that I saw over there. And they basically said, go to this park, go to that park. And so Botswana ended up becoming one of my quick favourites. There's 2 million people there compared to the 49 million in South Africa.
Okay.
So there's literally nobody there in terms of the amount of landmass that there's there. And it's just so peaceful. In Botswana, any of the cities, even the main city, you could have elephants walking down the main street. You could have lions in the main street. In some, I've seen warthogs digging up and literally in the car park next to the bank, So
okay.
it can be quite wild,
which
is amazing. So I've chosen Botswana and Tanzania as my two go-tos at the moment. But between the lines, then also said I have an ability to customize a trip, in a heartbeat. So we can easily build something anywhere if you want to go to Namibia.
How many people are normally on each safari when you take them?
I cap it at 5 or 6.
So it's a really small, intimate group.
Mm-hmm.
So they get to spend a lot of time with you.
Yep.
And therefore they're not sort of not like 50 people on a bus and it's like everyone trying to cram on, cram off, fighting for positions. They're actually going to see a lot of really cool stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. If you compare it to something like you go and try out a Kentucky experience in Europe or any of those bigger bus experiences, even in Australia, they offer it in Africa as well. You end up getting put on a bus with 20, 30 other people and you just don't get that chance. You're always craning your neck over someone. There's always someone chatting or laughing or making noise when you want them to be quiet or vice versa. That's why they call them, isn't it, Kentucky tours? Kentucky,
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this is one way of just basically regulating that and going, there's only 5 or 6 people. I can even talk.
How many tours do you do per season? So when's your season run? What time of the year does your season run?
So this year we've extended it. I've basically gone from offering 2 itineraries or one main itinerary last year, which was a Great Migration Tanzania experience.
Yeah.
To offering 3 different itineraries now. So one in Botswana, one in Tanzania, and then a combo of the 2. So the first, one of the only multi-country safaris you can do out there. And the season now basically runs we do early season ones in May. So just at the end of their wet season when everything's beautiful and green and lush and there's animals everywhere in the Okavango Delta. And that runs through until sort of the end of October, start of November.
Okay.
And incorporates the whole Great Migration season, which is pretty much July through September, October.
And all this information's on your website?
It is.
Which is raw-worldwide.com.
Mm-hmm.
And your background's also photography.
It is, yeah.
So did that spark some of the interest of wanting to go to Africa in the first place because you thought, wow, this would be a great place to photograph?
Absolutely, yeah. So basically early days from when my brother and I were real young, our parents moved us up to Bamaga, right on the tip of Cape York. And
we will talk about Brian later before we finish up.
We should, yeah.
I did, because I saw Brian recently and I told him you were coming on the podcast. And I said, we will talk about you and we'll give your business a little shout out at the end.
Yeah.
And he gave me that look like if I don't, he's going to rib kick me.
Yeah, he has that ability.
Yes.
He's a beast.
So we will talk about Brian at the end. So keep going, sorry.
Yeah, so we grew up pretty remote. So we grew up in northern Cape York and basically around culture. So we grew up alongside Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander folk.
So that gave you that whole interest in like the camping and outdoors in the first place.
Yeah.
Because you don't take someone who's a white collar accountant who all of a sudden wants to do African safaris.
No,
as
well,
a business? Well, they could.
You potentially could, but it's a bit of a bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So part of that is then, we grew up in the bush and we got a feel for culture and we got taken out by traditional owners and got a really good taste for what it is like for someone who's grown up and had traditions and generations growing up on the land. We just learned their way of living and it's just stuck with us forever. And then our dad was also a fishing guide for a time, so probably a combination of both living remote and having him as a guide has sort of planted that seed that we probably both wanted to become guides at some point too.
Okay.
So
that's cool. So when people go on the trips with you, because of your photography background as well, when they go on one of these safaris, I take it you get some really cool photographs of them that they probably would never get themselves if they were doing it.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's one of those, it's a value add. I don't add any extra cost to
I was going to say, that's just part of doing the tour.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful perk that you can, at the end of the trip, I'm actually pretty bad at processing them in a really quick time because there's just so much work to be done.
Yeah.
But it's just beautiful to be able to show them those photos at the end, and it's a photo of, someone who had no idea the photo was being taken, and there's a cheetah in the background or there's an elephant right there next to the car, and it just blows people's minds. And it's just a really nice opportunity to sort of wow them,
So do they know your background is photography when you get out there, or they do now if they're listening to this?
Yeah, they do now.
They're expecting some damn good photos. Now they go, well, Shane, we want some good photos taken of us. I'm going to pretend I'm looking out here with that lion walking past. Just get this side. This is my good side.
Yeah. That's right. There's going to be that planting now expectation. Thanks, mate.
So where most of when people reach out to you to come on these safaris, okay, they find you through the website, but is there certain countries that more people that reach out to you, or is everybody from Australia, or where do they come from?
Yeah, so basically I've got a bit of a mix at the moment. So in the last 3 years I've taken clients mostly from Aussie, but also French, Canadian, American, English. So it's been a bit of a mix, but that's also been a bit of a result of my following, So I've built a following through the photography and the guiding over several years now, and that's why I've got those guys. But I am targeting Aussies. I really would love to take Aussies over there because we have really great environment here. Why would we go somewhere else when we have really wonderful bush? But what we don't have here that is in Africa is the wildlife. It's in your face. It's very large.
So it's different to going to a zoo.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because that's the thing when I have spoken to people about going to Africa, and they're going, but I've gone out to, let's give you an example. Doesn't Disney World, they have like a safari type thing there. And so we'll go, I've gone there, I've seen the animals roaming around in nature. But you're saying when you go to Africa, it's just completely different.
Absolutely. And a lot of the times, like even if a zoo's really, really well run, the ethics are in place and so on, and they look after the animals well. The animals are still fed, and so that means a time of day. So they get a reliance on what time of day they get fed. They get a reliable meal at any time, basically. So the difference with that and wildlife is that anything out in the bush in the wild has to catch its own food or has to eat enough to be able to survive every day. It has to be able to find water. So there's almost a
different attitude.
It's a completely different attitude. There's a desperation. There's also... In zoos, you tend to find very relaxed animals because there are no predators either.
Yeah.
Whereas in the bush, everything's wired. Like their eyes are just always looking around, especially any...
I must admit that when you look at a lion, when I've gone to a zoo and I've seen a lion, they look like they're stoned.
Yeah, sometimes they are
chilled.
drugged. A lot of the times now, our ethics are getting better. Yeah, it's better now.
Yeah, because sometimes they'd be sitting there and they just look like, they've just had a big joint and they're sitting on a rock in the sun and they're looking at people and they just don't really care. Yeah.
There's just none of those those things to really entice them, There's no female on heat because they regulate who's on heat and what time they come on heat almost in a sense. So
when you take people out there though, one, it's safe.
Yes.
You have not lost anybody yet?
Not yet.
You do a head count when you go out there and the same amount of people come back
at the end. I do a head count, yeah.
So how did we have 4 or 5 when we left? So on all the tours, you've never lost anybody and it is completely safe. What makes it safe?
Basically, it's a number of things. So it's the fact that I spent those 3 years driving around. I got a feel for what is safe and what isn't safe. I experienced people all over Africa, so I got a feel for, even from a cultural and a people point of view, what's safe and what's not and what to look out for.
Yeah.
And then once we're actually in the bush, I drove around elephants, all sorts of different kinds of elephants and lions and hippos and all sorts of potentially dangerous animals, and got a feel for how their behaviours are. And that alone is enough to be able to go, yep, I know that this animal is not in a good mood today. There's 1,000 signs out there, and if you know and you've spent the time actually around them, you get to realise what the threats are, what the potential signs are.
Okay, so like lions, are they like domestic cats? When you see a domestic cat sitting there and its tail's like flicking, and you sort of go, it's not the time to go up there and go running past them.
Absolutely. Probably.
You don't yell out you don't say, hey, George, can you just run over there and grab something out of the esky and run back again?
Well, if you're looking to lose someone, potentially you could do that, but no, you really don't want to.
So how close do you actually get to the animals? With the different types. I've heard cheetahs are really chilled out. They can just be sitting up in a tree, you can walk past and they're not going to bother you at all. Yeah.
So a lot of the cats are really chilled out. Basically how it works is, and I don't do any walking safaris. Basically, the two places that I take people, part of the agreement before we even get there is that we're not doing walking safaris. What you'll find a lot with walking safaris is that you don't get close to animals, or they're just that little bit more wide. If they do see you there, they're just more cautious.
Yeah.
Whereas if you drive past them in a car, they're so used to safari vehicles from 20, 30 years of seeing safaris coming past them. They don't care. They just don't even bat an eyelid. So
you have windows on the vehicles?
No.
No? Okay,
No.
so there's no windows. Okay, so they're open vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
That's completely different.
Yeah. So part of the message that we convey with clients straight away, and we definitely do a handover or a bit of a brief at the start of every trip to give people an idea of what they can expect for the trip.
Yeah.
And that's not just at the start of the trip, it's also a lead-in from several months of, you get to talk to me from the start. So you talk to your guide from the very moment that you begin the planning, and I'm the guide and the agent. So that's definitely a perk, And so I'll be explaining that whole process to you from the very start. But when it comes to safety in vehicles, the way an animal, like none of those animals, especially the big cats, they don't associate us with food. There's no point that they know that they can't get food from humans. Humans don't feed them. There's no association
and that's probably part of it. Like, when there's ever been problems with animals, like say in the United States, and they'll talk about don't feed the bears, but people leave food out and the bears come and get the food. So they know people equates to food. So they're going to come walking in, and if they annoy you, you're going to get swiped. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's the same with cassowaries here in North Queensland. If you feed cassowaries, there's a good chance they're going to change their behaviour and start chasing, you for food. So
so the big cats over there, no one's throwing out food to them.
Oh no.
So they're not seeing a human and going, oh, that equates to some really good meat.
Or if you have, they're probably humans. Those humans probably aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
There's not much chance of them surviving a feeding episode like that. So
and we're supposed to taste like chicken. So they probably go, chickens are easier to catch.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they don't run as quick.
And we can't run very fast compared to everything else there, so we don't stand a chance.
Okay, so on a normal trip, say we're going on a trip, how long is each trip? How many days does each trip go for?
So different itineraries are different timing. So basically, the Great Migration trip, which we do in Tanzania, that's to actually see the wildebeest migration, and also a chance to catch all of the big five, so even black rhino. And that trip is 9 days and includes...
Is that the longest trip?
That's the shortest trip.
Oh, that's the shortest trip. Yeah. Okay.
So it's one of those things where if you go on a trip and you're going to go that far, you really need to immerse yourself and do it properly.
Yeah.
And if you did it for a day or, for a week, it's just not long enough. So the longer, the better.
And I've heard the migration is supposed to be... like, you can't describe what it's like.
There's nothing like it in the world.
It's like Las Vegas.
Yeah, it's far better than... It depends what you're talking about.
What I mean is, somebody said, it doesn't matter what you tell someone about Las Vegas.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how you describe it, what they've seen on TV, until they're actually in Las Vegas, then they go, oh, okay, this is so much different, whether it's good, bad, or just different to what they expected. I've heard the Great Migration is the same. Doesn't matter what you see on TV or what anyone tells you, to actually be there is supposed to just be mind-blowing.
Absolutely, yeah. It's much the same sort of link, actually. So the Great Migration is one of those things where, I guess if we look at Nat Geo, then we would assume that, it's all one big herd crossing all at once, and it happens all the time, and it's really intense, and the crocodiles always kill something.
Oh, so you get to watch that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
full
pretty
on.
So all the crocs are just sitting there in the water, just picking off these wildebeest as they're going through.
It's almost like one of those Indiana Jones sort of clips, hey, where you see or any of the Nat Geo stuff, you see the wildebeest filtering past these crocs, and the crocs are so well fed. They're just fat, and they're
just doing it for the hell of catching them, just for the fun of doing it.
Yeah, it's almost like that. It's just the sport of it.
So right at the end, when all the wildebeest go through, is there always those couple of stragglers?
Always, yeah.
And then they all get taken?
No.
They don't?
No. Basically what happens is the migration happens for about 3 months. They cross the Mara, and they cross north and south, back and forth many times, potentially in the season, chasing fresh green grass. Yeah. While there's sort of patchy rainstorms up there, and that'll bring fresh grass up. So one herd might cross one day and then cross back the next day, So
and the crocs are there, just bang.
And they're there, and they can potentially take them. But in all of the crossings, I've probably seen 40 or 50 crossings over the years now.
Yeah.
I reckon maybe a dozen of those I've seen crocs actually take something.
Okay.
So they'll be there. They're almost always at a crossing.
Okay, so there's no swimming on your trips?
No, definitely not.
Yeah, so I've seen photos where you've had people, they're standing on a rock and there's like a creek sort of running through. Is that part of that migration trip, or there's just different parts you go to? There's always rivers and creeks that you're going through.
Yeah, it's the whole Serengeti and Masai Mara ecosystem is massive. It's over 1,000 k's from top to bottom. So, a wildebeest herd, when they're migrating throughout the year, can do 2,000-3,000 kilometres easy in their round trip.
Okay. So when you're doing these trips, like say even the 9-day one, what are people sleeping in?
Okay. So, and this is a part of sort of doing it the hard way doing it the hard way first myself. I figure out what works and what doesn't. I used to sleep in a one-man tent, basically in a very simple setup, just with one cooking pot, and that was enough for me.
That was you.
But you can't do that with clients, and
No.
every year that goes on, you learn sort of more and more what expectations are and what you can do to make a camp more comfortable. So now...
Because like I jokingly say that my wife's idea of camping is staying at the Hilton. Oh, geez, I hope she's not listening to this.
It's right outside. Yeah, so it's evolving every year. But I don't. Part of the idea is that I don't ever want it to get to a lodge setup.
Yeah.
Basically, the camp idea is that it's a minimalist setup. We basically go in, we set up camp, and then we move off 3 or 4 days later.
Are people in individual tents, or is it one person per tent, or 2 people in a tent?
It's a twin share setup. So basically, we've got beautiful big dome tents with a really comfortable mattress and set up on the floor. Sometimes we can have stretchers, depends on what clients want. Comfy bedding, pillows, all that sort of stuff. There's a veranda on the front of the tent, and then this year also we'll have a proper, big kitchen tent as well. And then most of the cooking we do over the fire, just because it just gives it that more authentic feel as well.
Oh yeah,
so
that'd be great.
It's amazing.
What do people do about bathing over that 9 days? Because I know some people are thinking about that. Hygiene, cleanliness.
Yep. Yeah.
Especially by day 8 if you're sharing a tent with somebody else.
Yeah, that's right. So we've got proper showers there as well. So it's not like a running tap where you can just turn it on and jump under it for half an hour. But we've got a shower area where you go off and have your shower. And
so you're not doing it out in the nude?
No, it's a shower with a view, but no one else can see in where you are.
Yeah.
So it's still sacred in a sense. But you get to see the stars while you're having a shower, and that's pretty special in itself.
And what are the temperatures like when you're doing these trips? What's the temperature range? How should people be dressing for this?
If we're looking at we're talking migration time, it's a bit stormy, so it's sort of like our Northern Australian build-up. So it can get cold overnight down to sort of 10 degrees, but that's very rare. Most of the time it's got that slightly cooler at night time, but it can get muggy as well. During the daytime, it'll get up to 35, sometimes 40 degrees, so it can get hot.
Okay. So in your cars, we know there's no windows.
Mm-hmm.
Is there roofs, or everyone's got to wear the big hat? These might sound like silly questions.
No, they're not silly questions.
But they're the sort of things that I know when I've spoken to people about safari tours and all that, and these are the funny things that people say, or maybe they're just the funny things that go on in my head.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm picturing 35 degrees, no windows, no air conditioning. Is there a roof that's protecting me from the sun, or is it?
There is.
There is. Okay.
There is. So different countries have different vehicles even. So in Tanzania, for example, we use basically it's an extended Toyota troop carrier. And so it's basically a 10-seater. It's large enough, but we only take, like I said, 6 people.
Yeah.
And it's got a pop-top roof. So we basically pop the roof up and then you stand on your seats and you look out from your seats.
Oh,
and that's where you view from. So it's naturally air conditioned. The roof stays up all day. So anytime, if you're driving, you can jump up on your chair and hold on to one of the side bars and basically look out. And it's sort of like watching Jurassic Park go by outside. So it's pretty amazing.
Really cool.
So even to the point of, we're talking about Great Migration before, that experience is incomparable because you can't, even a video doesn't capture the sound. It doesn't capture the vibrations, and that's again, it's that Jurassic Park thing where, you're standing on the bank, or you're not standing, but you're in the car on the bank, and suddenly 50,000 animals are thundering past your car. You can feel the vibrations through the vehicle.
So what happens on the trip, because we're talking about the accommodation, 2 people shared, if you had a family of 3 going along, what do they do?
So we'll try, we can give someone a tent. So you can
accommodate one person on their own. You can't fit 3 in a tent though.
No, it's probably a bit cozy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's all right.
Yeah, sort of what you basically have a tent on either side, a bed on either side of the tent, and then you have a bit of a walkway in the middle, so it's still comfortable. So if you had 3, if it was a family of 3, we would totally just have 2 tents and just have one of you in the other tent.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure my wife won't mind sitting in the other tent.
But if we've got a group,
we'll put our daughter in the other tent.
Yeah, maybe. If you've got a group of 6 people, you can basically pair 2 of those people up. Say if it's 2 couples and
so that would be a great idea.
Something.
So if there's like a group of people and there might be 5 of them, for example, because you said you only take 5 or 6.
5 or 6, yeah.
Okay, so if there were like 2 families and there were 6 of them all together, and they said this would be completely different. Why don't we do this? That would be ideal. They all book for that one trip.
Oh, yeah.
They're all together, and therefore there would be a lot of laughs amongst them all as well.
Yeah, so preferably I'd love people to book as a whole group. If you could get 5 or 6 people together, then we just literally book out that whole trip to yourselves, and then we call it a private safari for that reason.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
just
thinking
yours.
of the Browns. The Browns. If you're listening to this, we've gone to Bali together. We've done cruises together. Just putting it out there. We could go to Africa together. My wife will come.
Seed planted.
Seed is planted, and they'll listen to this episode because they're local Cairns people. For all signs, give them a shout out.
There's a plug.
Okay, before we finish up, I just want to touch on your brother's business.
Yep.
So what's the name of Brian's business?
Brian runs a business called Cockatours. It's Cairns based as well.
What's it called?
Cockatours.
Spell that.
Cockatours.
Oh, Cockatours.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a bit of a tricky one.
It is a tricky one, yes.
Yeah. I've written those first 4 letters into my search engine a lot of times, and I'm only looking for safaris. But
I know, I was about to say, tricky. I'm sure he gets some interesting people turn up just wearing latex going, wrong tour.
He does. There's a plug for you, Brian Ross.
Yeah. So he takes people up to the Cape. He does the Cape trips.
He does. Yeah. So he does 14-day trips from Cairns to the very tip of Cape York and back again.
Okay.
And now this year he's also incorporating 2 more itineraries. So Kimberley to Darwin and then Darwin back to Cairns trip. So you've got 3 different trips there to choose from.
I take it he'd be doing that not during the wet season.
No, so he's got a pretty similar season to myself. So that'll be May through September. And yeah, that's dry season for them as well.
Okay, well, that's enough about Brian. So with the best way for people to find out more about what you're doing on the African safaris is to go to the website.
Yep.
raw-worldwide.com. Have you got any... Well, one thing I wanted to ask. When people finish the safaris, what's the feedback you're getting from people? Are they finishing and going, Shane, that was so much better than I thought it was going to be?
Always.
No one's ever gone away going, yeah, it was okay.
Yeah, sometimes. It depends who they are, but basically the whole idea of people booking and stepping out of their own comfort zone to come on a trip like this is that they want that really raw experience, so they want to go out there and really get a taste of.
I'm getting excited just thinking about it. Actually.
Yeah, it's full on. I get goosebumps every time I talk about it. It's
and you've done it so many times yourself.
Yeah.
That I can, like, I'm sitting here opposite you, so we're actually doing this in my office at home, and I can see the expression on your face, which other people can't see. Just you're excited talking about it.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. Actually, is it's just marketing it from a point of view of if I could have a sit-down conversation with everyone, I would get probably 50% booking straight away, just because there's that chance of really showing like the enthusiasm in my face and the energy in my voice and how much I love it. And I could never be bored. I've done it so many times, but it doesn't matter. It's just
like I said, before I met you, I was always, I don't really have too much interest in doing it. But every time I talk to you, I more and more want to actually do it. I'm actually quite excited about doing it.
Yeah. So probably the biggest take home for people is usually that really raw experience. It'll be something like a lion is roaring late at night, and that's something that would normally scare someone. If you're just coming to Africa for the first time, you're thinking, "Oh my goodness, I do not want a lion in camp. That'll just scare me." But after 9 days over there, you've become acclimatized. You understand the animal better, and you know that they're not out to get you, and that is the number one experience you take home. A lot of the times, the best time that people have had is that an elephant's walked right past the car, or a lion has walked around camp or roared or done something. It's just that something different.
Oh yeah, it sounds different.
Yeah.
Different to being you're lying at the Hilton and you just see someone going past with a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, which is what you get in a lodge. It's the same thing.
Wow, didn't expect that. So when people come on the trips, they fly into, whereabouts do they fly into?
So they fly into, well, it depends where we go, or where you're coming from basically, but you could fly into Johannesburg is the number one in South Africa. The other one would be Nairobi in Kenya. If you're going to Tanzania, then you go Nairobi to Arusha in Tanzania, or vice versa, Johannesburg up.
And you give anyone that's inquiring, you tell them which flight to get on and when.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And now Aussies, I've just started a partnership with Flight Centre. So
cool.
If anyone wants business flights or flights through someone who can basically look them up and get you the best possible deal for a very minimal, like it's $50 per person to get everything on one itinerary, including all accommodation before and after the trip.
Yeah.
That's an incredible deal. And someone else is doing all the hassles of booking for you, and they will get you the best price.
So you go to Flight Centre and just say, I want to do this trip.
Yep.
And you're in their system and they'll know exactly what to...
That's right, yes. You'd go through my website, call me.
So they booked a trip with you.
Yep.
Then they go and see Flight Centre and get all the flights and everything organised.
That's right, yeah. Ideally, the first way... You'd call and we'd have a bit of a contact call and basically go over everything. Yeah. I'd totally convince you through my passionate speech and
just have a coffee with you.
Yeah, that's right, and then you'll just love to come.
But that's in Australia, like Flight Centre's in Australia. So if there are people in America who are going, I've always wanted to do a trip to an African safari. Same thing. They just contact you through the website and just take it from there.
We just get the ball rolling. Every case is different. Everyone's different. They've all got their own. Whether they're from Canada or the States or Europe or wherever, everyone's going to have their own timing, so they've got to fit in with the times that I offer. Yeah. Or we come up with a custom safari that's going to suit them.
Well, I was going to say before, you said the shortest trip's 9 days. Mm-hmm. What's the longest trip?
So the longest is 21 days.
Okay.
So that's a combo of basically the best of Botswana. So that's a 9-day Botswana trip.
Yep.
And a 9-day migration trip with a few days off in between to sort of have a chill time and disconnect. And that's, like I said, there's not many companies in the world that offer a multi-country safari. So, and that's the best. Those two places, I think we touched on it before, was why we've chosen these places. Yeah, they're the best that I've been. There's no wildlife experience that compares to these places that I take people now. So
that sounds really cool.
Yeah, that's the reason.
So Shane, I want to thank you for sharing all your knowledge about Africa in general, just shedding some light on what an African safari is all about and what you're doing with Raw Worldwide. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Tyson. Nice to be able to explain it like this, and I can see your enthusiasm as well. I'll see you in Africa next year, eh?
I think it's on the cards. If I can convince the Browns, we could do it as a family trip, and my wife. But I think my daughter's already thrown her hand up and said that she's in.
Very good.
So it should be good. So thank you. Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Shane Ross today, and go and check out his business, Raw Worldwide. Just go to his website, raw-worldwide.com. I tell you, the trips that he explains going to Africa, and as I mentioned while we were talking, that Africa was never one of those countries that I thought, oh, I want to go there, visit there, and see these big animals. But after talking, I cannot wait to do this trip at some stage. Probably not this year, probably next year, but is definitely on the cards. And even if my friends and family don't want to go, I think I am going to go by myself. So please go and check it out. Check out his website. If you've ever thought about Africa, put it in your diary, whether it's for next year, the year after. Just if anything about this podcast sort of intrigued you, take action on it. That's what I always say. And that's the thing with this podcast, is all about bringing small business people and some of their stories to life. And that's what I've really, really enjoyed about putting this show together. And this episode has definitely been one of my favorites. Now, before I go, I'm going to give a shout out to my book, which is It's No Secret There's Money in Small Business. If you're looking for a small business book that covers a whole pile of different areas about having a better business and also improving your marketing, go and grab a copy of this book. You'll find it at Amazon. You can actually order it directly from my website, tysonfranklin.com. If you're in Australia, order it from there and I'll post it directly to you. Or you can just get it from anywhere online around the world. So that's it from me this week. Look after yourself, look after your family, and I will talk to you again next week. Bye for now.